Chapter 7. As Emberpaw and Yellowglance started walking back to camp, it began to rain. The first spring rain was here. It was not going to stop for anyone. It began to pour fast. Droplets hit Emberpaw's nose and tail, making her flinch, invisibly annoyed. By the time they arrived back at camp, they were drenched. Emberpaw sat in the apprentice's den, rainwater dripping onto her moss and bracken nest. As she began to groom herself, a sopping wet Bitterpaw and Swiftpaw entered the den, chatting as if they weren't drenched in the spring showers. "The clearing is starting to form hundreds of puddles, large ones too," mewed Bitterpaw as Swiftpaw nodded along with her. Emberpaw rolled her eyes. "You guys are so dramatic. A flood hasn't happened in moons," said Emberpaw as she curled up in her nest, listening to the pouring rain outside and the thunder clapping along with lightning crashing every few minutes. As Swiftpaw looked closer at Bitterpaw, he noticed scratches along her paw pads. "You should go make sure those don't get infected, Bitterpaw. They look pretty painful," Swiftpaw said, pointing his nose towards her paws. Bitterpaw nodded at him before looking away from him. She stepped outside to head to the medicine cat den. Cherryvine always made Bitterpaw nervous. Maybe it was her cold eyes or her judgmental stare. Whatever it was, it made Bitterpaw uncomfortable and skittish around her. Emberpaw laid her head down, the quiet settling into the apprentice den. Rain and thunder being the only sound, along with the occasional rustling of moss, brackens, and feathers. When Emberpaw woke in the morning, half the clearing was gone. Just dirt, no bushes, no sand, no pebbles. Only large rocks that had been unearthed in the storm. Emberpaw stepped carefully outside, trying her best to avoid the slippery mud puddles, and trying to wipe her paws on every piece of grass when she got the chance. In the clearing, Cherryvine was talking to Bitterpaw, her tail flicking impatiently. As soon as Bitterpaw finished speaking, Cherryvine stood up and walked over to the drenched leader's den, disappearing inside. Emberpaw walked down into the clearing, trying not to slip and fall, seeing Winfer walking up to the young... Seeing Winfer. Emberpaw walked up to the young permanent queen, who felt more like an older sister to Emberpaw than a motherly figure, despite Winfer being the one that had raised her. "It feels like half the camp is gone," Emberpaw said to the light cream she-cat with wispy fur. Winfer nodded, a distressed look on her face. She seemed to be looking into the distance at nothing. Winfer stood up and said only one sentence with worry in her voice. "Emberpaw, have you seen Goosethroat? Tell me you have, please." Emberpaw wanted to nod to reassure the queen, but she couldn't lie to her, so she told her she hadn't. With that, Winfer walked off to the medicine den, most likely waiting for Cherryvine to return. The wind felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just the uneasy worry in the camp, or just the emptiness of the camp. Emberpaw trotted up to Bitterpaw, hoping that at least she could shine a bit of light on this situation, but even Bitterpaw's smile had faded. It had faded away. It was replaced by an expression that can only be said to be a mix of worry and pain. Emberpaw noticed that she wasn't putting a normal amount of pressure on her left leg. Maybe it was still healing from the cuts that had been there the night before. "Bitterpaw, it's rare to see you without Swiftpaw. Where is he?" mewed Emberpaw before Bitterpaw nearly burst into tears. "You haven't seen him either? He's been missing since dawn along with Goosethroat." Pain was in her voice with worry. Emberpaw sat with her, curling her tail around her, trying to comfort Bitterpaw. Bitterpaw and Swiftpaw had always been attached to the hip since they were kits. If one of them disappeared, it would break the other. They most likely would go to the end of the world for each other. Hey, I'm sure he's okay, and I'm sure that Goosefoot was okay too. Bitterpaw nodded, nuzzling into Emberpaw's shoulder, making her uncomfortable. Emberpaw had always not been a big fan of physical affection or this cuddling or comforting thing. But in these situations, Emberpaw put someone else's comfort over her own. Only sometimes, though. Storm clouds were still thundering in the distance. The storm had rolled up north, but for how long?